Do you see a deal quickly emerging here, despite all of the rancor of the last couple of days?
Kelly, I actually do. That was a great conversation, and thanks for having me on. You do provide light instead of heat at these times, and so it's terrific to come on. I do think they'll reach a deal because they have to reach a deal, and that really gets also to last night's address at the Oval Office, where Europe gets into the crosshairs of the president. We know that we need Europe at times of crisis. In October 2009, global financial crisis, don't forget the G20 meeting where the U.S., UK, other European allies came together, and they stopped a hemorrhage that really could have led to a complete global financial meltdown. I was in Europe on 9/11. I was in the Eurostar under the tunnel from London to Brussels during 9/11. And at that time, NATO triggered Article 5, its collective defense mechanism, for the first time in history. It was essentially Europeans saying, we're going to come together to come to the defense of the United States if it needs it. That's the spirit of leadership we need right now. This is a global crisis. World democracies have to come together, and we're going to need the Europeans to address the financial aspects of this. So it's not the right time to put them up as the problem when they're part of the solution.
Fred, stay right there. Let me bring Ylan Moy in. She is on Capitol Hill for us, also continuing to report on what stimulus package may be shaping up here. Ylan, what can you tell us?
Well, right now it looks like the Senate just merely needs more time to try to assess what will come over from the House. I was speaking to a couple of senators as they went into the lunch where they discussed the decision to stay in session next week in order to keep debating this. I spoke to one senator, Cory Gardner, a member of Republican leadership, who said that he actually supports several parts of the House bill, but just needs more time to work through it, both with other lawmakers in the Senate as well as with the House. But the dilemma here for senators is that even as they decide to stay in session and continue these negotiations, there are a growing number who are having to either self-quarantine or have closed their offices due to the coronavirus. Senator Rick Scott of Florida is the latest to announce that he's going to be self-quarantining, was supposed to have a press conference, abruptly called it off when it was determined that he had come into contact with someone who has now been tested positive for the coronavirus. So these negotiations are certainly fluid. This is a sign that they do want to keep working, but I think everyone was surprised by the amount of pushback from Republicans to a bill that Democrats had hoped would sail through the House and perhaps even receive bipartisan support in the Senate.
Ylan, stay right there. I'd like to make this a little bit more of a conversation with Fred. You know, Fred, obviously, I don't like when people blame the political process and say we can't have the partisan wrangling. Look, these people represent passionate points of view among their constituents, and there's a strong difference of opinion about the best ways to solve this crisis. Is there common ground? What common ground do you see that could shape up quickly here to get something of almost $1 trillion in size passed?
Well, I think the common ground's going to come when there's more of a realization of how much community spread there has been. We've got about 5,000 tests out there. The South Koreans have done 100,000 tests. The British have done 25,000 tests. So it looks like we don't have as much spread as different parts in Europe, but I think we are going to have it. And I think the more that it gets into the system, that it's not a question of whether or not this is happening. It's really a question of how far is it going to go. And I think as soon as that becomes clearer and clearer, you're going to have a lot less bipartisan wrangling and a lot more coming to an agreement. And I think the president has to lead on this. He has to say, look, and not only do we have to act internationally in unison, we also have to act together in unison, and he has to help the Republicans find their way to this agreement.
Yeah, Ylan, is there any support, as you can tell, for moving forward with something like a coronavirus czar, putting Dr. Anthony Fauci in that position, you know, having a kind of a trusted, impartial person to become the voice of authority on this and let the rest of the country know how they should respond to outbreaks, you know, figure out, you know, literally spend 24 hours in a closed room and say, how is the Senate going to meet? How is the House going to meet? We can't afford not to have these discussions underway because of coronavirus.
Not in this particular bill, Kelly, but I will say that both Republicans and Democrats have acknowledged that this is not a perfect bill. There's not everything that either side wants in it, certainly not as much for Republicans as they would hope, but that they will have to take several bites of the apple. So right now what they're focused on is perhaps using the framework of the House bill, which does not include a coronavirus czar, as a starting point, try to get this passed, and then perhaps come back with something else. One of the sticking points in the bill right now is how to structure paid sick leave. So everyone agrees we should have sick leave for people who have to stay home because they've been infected or have somehow been having to quarantine because of the outbreak. But do you do that through the Social Security Administration? Do you do that through some other separate structure? How long should the sick leave last? How much should it be? These are the details that are now bogging down the discussion, and we'll see if they can get them resolved.
Yeah.